Hi everyone, welcome to the 58th Agile Roundabout. Glad to have you guys on board. It's obviously for those of you who are regular Agile Roundabout attendees, I do look a bit different to the regular host, John. If you're expecting John, he's on annual leave today, so I'm stepping in his place, and I'm lucky enough to introduce you all to Gavin and Nick, who are our speakers today. Obviously, we're talking about mental health in the workplace, and we're really lucky to have these guys available to chat with us today. Gavin's going to be going first, and then we're going to be hearing from Nick, and afterwards we'll do some collective Q&As. So throughout the talks, if you've got any questions you want to ask either Gavin and or Nick, then you can post them in the comments. We'll make a note of all your questions, and I'll feed them back to Gavin and Nick at the end of the talks. If you guys want to tweet and do anything on the socials, you can see our handles in the bottom corner there, so feel free to tweet us and hashtag the roundabouts, and yeah, we hope you enjoy the talks. So I'm going to make way for Gavin, and we'll get going.
Cool. Hi everyone. My name's Gavin Wade. I'm VP of Product at Unmind. I'm going to be talking about my mental health journey so far, but I want to start with a quick bit of background. I've been working in tech and product for over 20 years now, spending the majority of that time in startups. I was really lucky early in my career that I got to work with Mary and Tom Poppendike very briefly, and they're like the grandparents of lean software development, and this kind of massively influenced my approach to tech and my career to date. More recently, I've been at OVO Energy. I was there for 7 years. I joined OVO when there was only a few hundred people. They had less than 0.5% of the energy market. They really were a disruptor. They were trying to focus on customer service. And that worked for them. It turns out focusing on your customers is the right thing to do. They're now the third largest energy supplier in the UK, and building a B2B2C smart energy platform, hoping to decarbonize our planet, and that's being licensed by companies globally. I helped grow their tech and product teams from 2 to 45 in that time across London, Lisbon, Bristol, and Edinburgh. And then I joined Unmind in April. But I'm going to tell you later why I joined. I actually want to start by going on my journey to explain how I got there, and by saying that we are all unique. I'm not going to be able to tell you any magic formula or give you a silver bullet to help people with their mental health, but because you need to find what works for you and go on your own journey as well. The stats tell us that 1 in 6 people suffer from poor mental health. And that kind of makes it not about everybody. And when really we all have mental health from the day we're born to the day we die. And so by me talking about my own journey, and it's only by us all talking about it, as Nick's going to do as well, that we can make mental health about everyone, about the 6 in 6 rather than the 1 in 6. But I haven't always really appreciated this. It was when I look back, it was back in senior school when I first became aware of having like particularly dark feelings in my life. I had a really bad lisp and stutter, and I'm dyslexic. And not being sporty in any way meant life at an all-boys school was really, really tough. And it just felt like there were hurdles at every step. I'm colorblind as well. And I remember being given a list of jobs by the teachers that I wouldn't ever be able to do. And this kind of led to kind of feelings of not being worthy and feeling really quite down about myself, and all these dark feelings. I was really fortunate, though, that I found connections with other people who had like-minded interests, and shared common challenges. And this first insight into the power of feeling connected really kind of helped me, and sharing your problems and feeling like you're not alone was a really powerful insight for me. So despite finding school really tough and having these dark feelings, sharing that helped me a lot. And so I fostered building these connections with people and tried to build on it as a strength. and used it as something to lean on. I left school and I wasn't super confident in who I was or my abilities, and I went to work in a pub for a while. My confidence grew, actually. This is kind of working with people just who kind of respected me for who I was, and I made friendships. But it wasn't long before my mum said I had to get a proper job. And there was this little company up the road looking for people, and it was a startup. They weren't called startups then. This was 20 odd years ago, but it certainly was. I was like employee number 80. I wasn't entirely sure that I was going to be cut out for office life and working with these really well-educated people. And again, I kind of relied on my ability to kind of build connections to get stuff done and putting groups of people together that complemented each other to solve these kind of problems you get at startups. And it was at this point I began to realize that my dyslexia wasn't actually a weakness. I realized that I kind of viewed problems in a different way to my colleagues, and I could bring an additional lens to the table on the problem we were trying to solve. And as happens in startups, you kind of naturally gravitate to where you add the most value. And for me, that was working with the tech team. And I found that I could work through these problems with designers and engineers and connect these problems with the business and customer outcomes that we were seeking to pursue. And I didn't realize this at the time, but I was really starting to embrace me more and more and valuing my differences. And the more I kind of did this, the more happier that I was becoming. And it's this introspection that really kind of helped me begin this journey of really kind of looking in and understanding who I was and looking about what I could do to help myself. It didn't matter that I had these perceived weaknesses. They were actually my superpowers and were enabling me to flourish. This business I was in, it grew from 80 people to 3,000, and we floated on the stock market and we got it into the FTSE 250, and it was just like wild, wonderful ride. But working a startup can be super tough and really, really fast paced. And there's lots of highs and lows that come with that. And you kind of need a way to find a way to manage those highs and lows. And I guess now people might call this building up your resilience. And I knew I needed to do some up. And I guess I started life hacking, and I realized through personal experimentation, I could find ways of improving me and making myself happier. I could measure through the things I'd done, whether I was feeling happier and better able to cope. To bring some flavor to that, I had never done any exercise. I didn't even consider myself sporty in any way. I smoked daily at the time. I certainly wasn't a runner. But a colleague of mine actually wanted me to go out running with them. They said, "Oh, look, I need to get fit. You just come out with me." And they were a lot shorter than me, which meant actually when I went out with them, it was kind of okay. And I realized getting fit didn't mean sprinting or being fast or keeping up with everyone else. It meant finding my own pace that worked for me and with people that were in the same place as me. And doing it made me feel happy, not actually whilst running. If you run, like most people, I probably don't enjoy actually running, but the feeling after of achieving that and doing that definitely contributed to making me feel happier. And I started to realize that being happy is about so many things and helping yourself. And then I started wanting to explore my own mind more, and being in a fast-paced kind of business with a young family can be really tough. So I started another experiment, and I started meditating, and I started using Headspace, and I used it for many years. And it was through that I also realized the power of me time, and kind of woke up to this realization that you can't really look after other people unless you're looking after yourself first. And I guess that can sound kind of selfish, but you can't do your best for others around you unless you really are caring for yourself. And so then I also started to look at what I ate and how that affected me, especially my sleep, which is never great and is still a challenge to this day. Years later, I left this company and I tried some larger companies. And I ended up at OVO Energy, as I spoke about earlier. And my time at OVO was great. Another fast-paced startup, and they were really forward-thinking as well. There was lunchtime meditation, and there's a gym on site with fitness classes throughout the day, flexible working, and this really encouraged me to continue my journey. And I got into journaling about 4 years ago, and I still do that every day now. And this is a kind of great way of reflecting for me. I've even started reading the Daily Stoic this year, and I'm still experimenting with diet and exercise. And I think I'm always going to be doing that for the rest of my life. But there are things that just haven't worked for me. I've tried things and they haven't. I've tried giving up alcohol a couple of times, but this just hasn't worked for me. I wasn't happier, and I don't believe it had any negative consequence actually having alcohol. I believe I had a reasonably healthy relationship with it. But again, this just reminded me that we're all different. And it just reinforced that no way works for every person. A couple of my good friends have actually given up booze, and it's had a significant positive impact on their life. So I definitely encourage people to try it and see if it does work for you. My inspiration for all of these things I'm like talking about, it sort of come from so many people in my life, not just my family, people at work and my friends. And I'm really lucky, actually, one of my best friends, Paul, was also kind of like on this lifelong journey and learner. And we kind of often reflect together about what works. I've usually got a glass of wine and he's got a glass of water. But just having someone else that you can talk to these things about, again, really helps me, and even doing these talks as well. But finding someone that you can talk to has been really important for me. So why did I join Unmind? As I said, I kind of learned over many years what kind of really works for me in maintaining my mental health. But the past year has obviously been really tough for everyone because of COVID. And I really learned a lot more about myself. Within the first month of lockdown and working from home, I started having like dark thoughts and feelings again, which I hadn't had for many years. And I couldn't actually work out why. I was like, well, what's going on? I'm spending more time at home. I'm not traveling. I'm with my family. And I knew I needed to explore this. All the usual things just weren't working for me. These healthy habits I had formed, and I was still feeling this way. And so I talked about it with my boss, my work colleagues, my friends, my family. And I eventually realized, and it seems really obvious to me talking about it now, but being an extrovert, I get my energy from physically being around people. And that meant actually co-locating with my work colleagues and working with them, which is obviously back then you weren't supposed to be doing it. But I needed to be in the office. I'm really fortunate. OVO had set up a COVID-safe office environment. But as a leader of an OVO at the time, it was super tough because you didn't want to set what people might perceive as a bad example, where you're kind of encouraging people to go into work by being in the office yourself on those calls. And so I had to be really explicit about why I was going in. It was for my mental health, that I needed to be in there around other people that were in a similar kind of situation to me, and just make sure I was sending the right message. But I had to be really explicit and like reinforce that. And so OVO has definitely been great for me. And I wasn't looking to leave, but as sometimes happen, the stars align, and I was contacted about this company that was trying to change the world of mental health, and they needed someone to help grow their tech design and product capability, which I love doing. And I feel super fortunate and blessed to be working at Unmind. The leadership team there set some really amazing examples. So everyone's calendar is open, obviously, and all of them block out an hour in the morning to prep for the day. Their lunchtime is at least an hour to exercise and eat. And then also from the end of the day is blocked out for family time. And that time is sacred. No one messes with that. And then that just trickles all the way down. And we all have that. And I have that in my diary now, and it's amazing. They share their own life challenges and how they're feeling, and regularly display gratitude as well. And just all of these good behaviors that they're displaying just spread out like a ripple in a pond. And it's amazing to see the impact that has. So I'm not going to tell you what to do or that you should even try any of these things that I'm talking about. But I've realized that there are a few things that are certainly important, and that hopefully you've gotten from this journey that I've talked about, which is recognizing your uniqueness and that you're different, and we're not all the same, and what works for me might not work for you, and we all have differences. So you've got to really embrace your uniqueness. It's what makes you special. I would encourage everyone to experiment and take ownership for kind of improving their mental health. Find out what works for you. And mental health is definitely a whole person approach. It's psychological, social, and physical. All of those things together will contribute. It's not just about meditating. And if something seems too big to try, just change 1% every week. Like, just change that smallest thing and start forming it into a habit, and you'll build it up over time. This is a journey we go on for our whole life. Be kind to yourself. It's only when we trip that we learn to tie our shoelaces a little bit better the next time. And that's all part of the process. Be kind to others. You never know what anyone else has going on. And it kind of makes me think of my situation of, I was going into the office. There was definitely some people like, you shouldn't be doing this, Gavin. Actually, when they found out why, it became okay. So just your first instinct, just be kind to people and understand their situation. Remember that mental health is something we all have all of the time, and we should look after it like we look after our teeth every day, like forming those healthy habits. Concentrate on your strengths. You need to find your superpowers, and it don't have to be what anyone else would think of as a superpower, but embrace it. You're you, and we're all special. I want to thank you for letting me share my story today. I'm not actively on social media platforms, but I am on LinkedIn. So if you want to DM me and connect, please do. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Gavin. That was awesome. That was really nice talk. And now we have Nick coming in. I'm going to save Nick the trouble, and I'm just going to explain there were some gremlins in the tech. So I'm going to be in control of Nick's slides. So if there are some bumps in the road, blame me and not Nick. So we're going to give this a go. And I'm going to break the fourth wall here and tell Beth that I'm ready. The slides are good to go. So can oh, I suppose I need to share my screen, don't I? So share screen. Yes. And okay. There we go. I'm assuming that's working, Beth. Beth, tell me on Slack if it's not working. Oh, okay. Gremlin. Share screen. These steps. Oh, sorry, it's my Chrome. We may have an issue. My Chrome might not allow this, but I'm just going to check now.
Should we go with that, Rob?
If you want to go with it, I'll try and get it sorted.
I can't stand the anticipation for the audience.
Crack on. I'll see if I can get it working.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, apologies everyone, and thank you so much for having me. My name's Nick Jemetta. It's a real pleasure to be here, and following on from Gavin, I just want to say thank you to him for being so open and sharing his story with so much candor. I can relate to so much of it, and some of the same themes will be coming through in this talk as well. So I was delighted to be able to come to this talk when I was approached by the Agile Roundabout. I also work in digital. I'm a digital product consultant, number of years in large retailers, but I'm also a mental health campaigner and a speaker on mental health. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that journey. But if I had my slides up, the first slide would pretty much articulate what I talk about, which is how I live and thrive with anxiety. So today, my world, looks pretty great from outside looking in. I'm married, I've got 2 young children, my career's going well. If things are good, but it didn't always feel like that to me. So fairly similar to Gav, actually, when I was growing up as a young boy, as a teenager, I always felt different. And this was in the 80s when being different meant you were a target for the bullies. I wasn't great at sport. I was enthusiastic, but always getting picked last for the football team. And anyone who's been there knows how that feels. I struggled with my self-confidence, with my self-worth. I really didn't think I fitted the mold that was communicated in society, in my family, in school. It was very much a linear path of you go through school, you go through college, you go to university, you get a job, you settle down, you get married, you have children. And, you know, I never saw myself fitting in that linear path. And if I wasn't in that linear path, then it would be a question of, well, where would I go? And I've just seen the slides pop up. Awesome. I will explain why I'm dressed like that shortly. You can see, I'm afraid I'm not in fancy dress today. I do have a Pokemon t-shirt, and you'll see perhaps in the background a little nod to some of the stuff that I'll be talking about. Rob, if you could just move on to slide 4 for me, please. We'll skip past the nice family photos. That's it. So these are just some photos of me at that time that I was describing. You know, unsure of myself, not knowing how I fitted into the mold that society wanted me to fit in, and I worried a lot, and I overthought things. Please go back, Rob. Sorry. But I didn't label it as anxiety. I didn't know of it as anxiety. I just knew that I worried a lot, and I struggled to make connections. And like what Gav was saying, I really struggled to make connections, and I went to university struggling to make those connections. I lost my support network from my parents, and university was a really difficult time for me. And I should have said up front, apologies, I missed that. But everything I talk about today, there might be triggers for you around some of the things that I'm going to talk about. And I'm not a medical professional, so as Gavin says, anything I suggest is really something that's worked for me personally. I do have, fortunately now I've got the deck up, I do have a slide that might help anyone who is struggling in terms of signposting and support. So apologies for not mentioning that. So as I say, I went to university. I was burdened by anxiety. I was burdened by not really knowing who I was, by not finding my voice, by struggling to connect with people. I started drinking, and I started drinking heavily, like any university student does, or did at least. And I didn't realize that alcohol was a depressant, and I also didn't realize that my anxiety would also manifest itself as depression. So those things all collided together, and I suffered from an experience, dark thoughts, like Gavin said, and they manifested as thoughts of suicide. And that went on for 6 months, and it was scary and it was terrifying, and I didn't understand it. I didn't want to talk about it, and I buried it, because at that time my university, and this is not a slight on my university because I love my university, it's a reflection of the time and the situation. The university really didn't support students with thinking about their brain. It was more about their bank balance, to be honest. And it wasn't talked about in society. You know, these kind of events and discussions weren't happening. Mental health was something that, you know, frankly, you would hide away and that you should be ashamed of. So we can flick on to the next slide, please, Rob. So I had this kind of really difficult time, and I kind of clumsily worked my way through university. And if you could just do a couple more clicks, Rob, because I've got some custom animation, which is seeming like a bad idea now. I came out of university having never really dealt with all these issues, to be honest. I got myself into work, and, you know, one of the, I guess, benefits that I've now come to realize from my anxiety is that, you know, I'm super determined. I don't tend to let things defeat me particularly easily. I'm empathetic. I'm good at listening. I'm good at building relationships, funnily enough, which is something I never really considered that my anxiety gave me, because I'm a good listener and I'm kind. So I take the time to get to know people. I got into the world of work, and, you know, my parents had instilled this kind of hard work and really knuckling down. And I went on this kind of fairly linear path. I'd always been a geek at heart. So at school, when everyone else was playing football and out dating, I was playing Warhammer and playing on my playing video games. So that gave me this interest in technology, which has kind of always persisted in my career. And I followed this really linear path. I got into product management around the sort of 2012 time, although maybe it wasn't called product management then at BT, and progressed my career through into some pretty big retailers. And, you know, my career and my life was going well, as I said, but the mental health side really wasn't on my agenda. If you can just click one more time, please, Rob, and there's going to be another little, here we go. And then in 2018, my life changed, and I had this awakening. One of the things that I used to manage my anxiety was pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And that might sound, slightly counterproductive, counterintuitive, but what I found as my career progressed was that I could manage my anxiety by doing things that I didn't think I could do. Because when I did those things and when I achieved things, I could look back, I could be proud of myself. And it was kind of this positive fuel that kept me growing and kept me believing in myself, because I had to learn how to believe in myself as an adult, because I never had any of that belief when I was growing up. So in 2018, I took myself on a public speaking course, and that's exactly what you do as someone that manages anxiety and is an introvert. And like Gavin said, I have a stutter. And the stutter tends to come out on words beginning with D, so working in digital can be a bit of a nightmare, as you can probably imagine. I went on this public speaking course, and they asked us to talk about a time that we had overcome adversity. My immediate thought was, wow, my life's been pretty easy up until now. I'm really not sure what I can talk about. And then out of nowhere, these experiences and this sort of dark periods started flooding back, and I just opened up. And I spoke about it. I talked about living with anxiety and how that felt as a man. And the reaction from the audience, it was like Pandora's box. This passion and this fire was just lit in my belly. And I knew that I'd found my purpose in life. I knew why I was on the planet. I knew that I had to continue sharing, to break down the stigma, to demonstrate that no one should be ashamed or embarrassed if their mental health isn't what they want it to be. And actually, our mental health, as Gavin was saying, it's about the 6 in 6. It's about all of us. If you've got a brain, you've got mental health. It's like if you've got a leg or an arm, you've got physical health. It should be no different. And I went to the workplace, and I wanted to do something with this purpose and this fire. And I knew that the workplace was one of the frontiers where mental health really wasn't talked about, but was such an important part of it, because your mental health can massively swing on how you feel about your work and your career and the purpose it gives you and the money you're earning and the relationships that it creates and the pressure it puts on you. And then the organizations I was with at the time, we did loads of good work on diversity and inclusion, but not on mental health and wellbeing. And frankly, that wasn't good enough for me. So I worked with one of the directors. I started to disrupt and advocate for us to do more. And I co-chaired and founded our first employee resource group focused on wellbeing. I told my story to what I thought would be a few colleagues in our canteen. It turned out to be 120, and it just snowballed. We started to get more support from the organisation. It turned out more people wanted to talk about mental health. They wanted it normalised. They wanted to understand what signposting and support was available. They wanted to start having some of these difficult conversations and getting them out in the open, because you can only really be yourself and bring your best self to work if you can be open and transparent and vulnerable. As Gavin said earlier, we're all unique, we're all unicorns. We've all got skeletons in our closet that can impact us at any point in our life, including in the workplace. And it was really important to me that I took a lead on that, and I took a stand for something that I believed in. And it snowballed from there, because then I took this passion, this purpose, and this energy, and I pushed it out online, and I started vlogging and blogging and being really open about living with anxiety on LinkedIn. And it exploded. I got nominated for an award, which I then won with an organisation called This Can Happen. Since then, I've done a lot of campaigning. I've joined various different organisations. I work with different charities. I've started to do talks in all sorts of different contexts. If you can just flick on a slide, please. I'm an ambassador for This Can Happen. We just need to flick on again. Damn custom animation. That's a product manager for you, trying to make these slides too pretty. And then lockdown happened. Gavin kind of alluded to it, and for me, lockdown was fairly difficult because I was trying to juggle homeschooling and work, and I was doing all of this campaigning in addition to my day job, working in product. And I was trying to bring some of the discussion into my product teams and my product managers, and I was trying to live and breathe and extol the virtues that I think are so important for leaders to role model. But it was difficult, and Joe Wicks came along, and his PE with Joe was a bit of a godsend for me, because it was something my family could do together. Exercise is something that for me personally can make a bad day a much better day. So we started doing PE with Joe, and then he started to wear fancy dress. And I thought, yeah, we'll do that. So as a family, we got involved in the fancy dress, and I'd seen the impact that lockdown was having on the well-being of my teams and my colleagues. You had people living on their own, you had people in shared housing, you had people that really didn't have the workspace that maybe I'm fortunate to have. And the general situation with COVID was taking its toll. And at the end of that workout, I was a bit sweaty, and I was dressed in this stupid skeleton costume. And I just thought, if I rocked up on a video call dressed like this, video calls getting pretty boring. I'm pretty sure, 1, I can make someone laugh. 2, I can start a conversation about how someone's feeling. And 3, they might ask me why I'm doing it. So I did. I wore a fancy dress costume to one video call. If you can flick onto the next slide, please. That one costume turned into this incredible adventure and the creation of this alter ego of mine, Fancy Dress Dad. Because that one costume led to 100 more. So I wore 100 costumes throughout the period of lockdown, really with the intention of demonstrating that talking about mental health does not have to be scary. We all have mental health. It's nothing that we should be ashamed of, but sometimes society puts pressure on the individual to talk when they're struggling. Actually, it's more important for the other 99% of us to be comfortable and confident to ask a question, to see how someone is, to ask if someone's okay, and ask more than once, and then to be able to listen non-judgmentally, accept that we're not medical professionals, but know that we can signpost to support. And this kind of fancy dress journey just took me on just some incredible experiences. My children loved it. I was wearing these fancy dress costumes on the school run. I decided to raise money for charity because I thought, if I'm going to sit here on video calls dressed like this, and I did wear these costumes on every video call, irrespective of who was on the call. If we were talking about sensitive or difficult topics, I might jump on in fancy dress and switch the video off. I had to be sensitive to those kind of cultural norms. But broadly, I was sat there dressed as Hulk Hogan, as a pirate, as Minnie Mouse, as all these different things. I would mock up my background and really try and live and breathe the character. And the interest in what I was doing snowballed. I'd like to say it was luck. There was a little bit of that, but there was a heck of a lot of persistence. Getting into the media is not easy. This became a third job, or a fourth job probably, in addition to day job, fundraising, campaigning, family. This was alongside it. But I got onto BBC Breakfast twice, and I was interviewed live on BBC Breakfast twice. I got onto 5 Live. I got onto Heart Radio. I actually got to meet Joe Wicks kind of at the end of this, and it's just been an incredible adventure for me personally. But more importantly, I know that I've shared my message and got more people talking about mental health. And this has been seen by millions of people. It got picked up by the ambassador, the UK ambassador in Panama. So I can truly say I've gone global. I also raised more than £10,000 for a number of mental health charities, and that just meant so much to me. That me rocking up, dressing like this, not doing anything amazing like many other people out there have done during lockdown, could raise so much money. I was really grateful for the generous donations. So if we can just move on again, I wanted just to finish with a couple of reflections and try and sort of make those reflections relevant to the audience. I work in the same space as many of you watching this and listening to this. I've spoken to you about how I live and I believe I thrive with anxiety, but I still have good and bad days. I think working in digital and working in technology brings its own challenges. It is hard. We're working at pace in businesses that are trying to digitize, with customers that are using our products 24/7, and that can be exhilarating and exciting, but it can feel overwhelming, and some days can be really difficult. I've had days where I feel awful. I've had days where I have a panic attack and I can't go to work because I feel that as the product manager, I've got all this pressure on my shoulder to get everything right first time, and that my team is relying on me, my stakeholders are relying on me, the business is relying on me, and that can be really difficult. The pace and the pressure can feel relentless. And then other days, you might ship something, you might solve a difficult problem, and suddenly your mind feels freer and you feel happier. But as Gavin said earlier, as individuals, we have more control than we think. being aware of how we feel, for me, has been a really key starting point. When you're aware of how you feel and why you feel like that, you can do something about it. And I've created what I call my wellbeing toolbox, or wellbeing first aid kit, as I believe some other people have referenced it. So like Gavin said, I experiment. I treat my life as an experiment, and how I've learned to manage my anxiety is an experiment. I meditate. I'm a bit off and on with it. I want to be more on than off. It works for me though. I like getting out in nature. I like exercising. I like building Lego. I've got my Lego Millennium Falcon here next to me. I've not finished it yet, which is a source of great irritation, but getting into those kind of flow activities, using my hands, I find that a really good way of switching off. Asking my line managers for clear objectives. Yeah, that helps my anxiety, because there's nothing worse in the world of work, especially in digital and technology, when you are working at pace with ambiguity, than not being clear on what the strategy is, what the priorities are, what are the things we're not going to do. There's lots of different things we can all do, even when we might feel a bit helpless. I think also, though, that leaders need to take more responsibility. And I was really delighted to hear about some of the cultural norms that Unmind have got in place. I know, speaking from fairly recent experience, that some organizations do not have those cultures. So whilst as an individual, we have a level of control, I believe, in something I campaign for and will continue to campaign for, is that organizations need to be more accountable for creating mentally healthy workplaces, for creating the right cultures, for role modeling the right behaviors, for being clear about strategy and about priority. It's fine that organizations want to be ambitious, but we have to understand what we can say no to and why we can say no to it. Trying to do more faster with less may work in the short term, but it will very quickly create dissatisfaction amongst your people, and it will start to make your people burned out. And I've had, again, fairly recent experience of that, and I can tell you that it's not a nice experience. And as a result of going through that, I've made a massive pivot in my own professional life, because frankly, my work is not worth my mental health. I've got about a minute left, so that's perfect time. If we can just go on again, please. So I said earlier, I always like to finish with some signposting and some support. If anything today has triggered you in a negative or positive way, obviously it's never my intention to upset, but I think it's important we get some of these topics out in the open. There's loads of external support out there. If I can leave you with one message from this talk, go and download the Hub of Hope. It's an incredible app. It's like a mental health toolbox in your pocket. It simply uses your location and then signposts you to loads of relevant local support, and it's the preferred digital signposting tool for Public Health England and for the NHS. So this is not something that I'm pushing with any self-interest in it. This is an app that the NHS recognise and want as many of us as possible to have in our pocket. There's plenty of others there, but the Hub of Hope is the one that I hope as many of you as possible will download. And my final slide, like Gavin said, we just move on to the last one. If anyone wants to connect with me, I'm very active on LinkedIn. I talk a lot about mental health, about well-being, about product management. I'm also active on the other channels, but LinkedIn is probably the place to be reaching out to me. And that's me done. I think we're on to questions. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much, Nick. That was awesome, and thanks again to Gavin as well. Obviously, some really interesting topics covered there. So obviously, just for the viewers, we've got questions you want to ask. Obviously, just stick them in the chat. I've got one here from Ada. I'm super inspired by both your openness and vulnerability. Both of you have touched on this. How has mental health changed your view on your future career? Go on, Gavin, you can go first.
Yeah, it definitely, I think that experience I went through in the past year with COVID kind of really opened me up to the idea of that I wanted to work somewhere where I could make a difference in this respect. So I was working at OVO because I loved the social mission of decarbonising our planet, and it was amazing to be able to be part of that. But then during COVID and my own experiences again in reflecting on all of that and seeing actually other problems that my friends and family were suffering with because of the impact of COVID on their life really kind of pushed me to see Unmind as a place where I could really go and like make a difference, and I'd see my career staying at Unmind and helping them change the world of mental health.
Cool. Sounds awesome. It must be amazing to have that feeling, that sense of excitement, I guess, is for the future.
Yeah, it is. It can feel like a big responsibility. Like, we're always kind of getting customer feedback, and like some of that feedback is just amazing to hear how what you're doing is helping people on a daily basis. There's a big kind of responsibility there as well, that you've got to tread very carefully and get this right.
Of course. What about you, Nick?
I might be putting my CV Gav's way at some point. I said in my talk that I've been on a mental health journey for a long time. I'm very open about my anxiety. At the start of this year, I was signed off with work stress and anxiety because of a line manager that didn't role model the behaviours that I talk about with mentally healthy workplace, and that was really difficult. But I'm so grateful for it. Like, I'm so grateful for all the other difficult experiences I've had, because I've come out the other side of it almost like a phoenix reborn. So I've left that employer. I now work for myself, so I'm a digital product consultant, but I only work 4.5 days a week. And the reason I only work 4.5 days a week is I want to give myself time and space to practice all the self-care that I've talked about, but also I want to be more intentional with what is most important to me, and what is most important to me is campaigning for better mental health for all of us. So over time, that half a day a week might turn into a day a week, which might turn into more, so that I can start to more actively and more intentionally pursue my broader passions and my broader purpose. And who knows, in the future, maybe I can combine my love for digital and tech with my passion and purpose for well-being in some other space. But right now I'm kind of comfortable exploring both. And the reality is my mental health campaigning goes way beyond the day job. This is something that is kind of a core part of my life now, and I can't ever see that changing.
So I guess that kind of obviously your passion is, as you said, campaigning for mental health, but I suppose whatever anyone's passion was, if they are doing something for themselves, that gives you a sense of fulfillment, right? That it's like a personal fulfillment, it's for you, and then that however long you spend, whether it's half a day or an hour here or there, that's bound to give you a sense of you've done something for yourself, right?
Massively. I mean, it's like the perfect virtual circle, because it just fuels me to do more, gives me the energy, gives me the get up and go. That's what, for a lot of my professional and personal life, to be honest, I was lacking. I always had this perception that everyone else had it figured out, but I've realized as I've got older that actually no one really does. That when you do find the thing that gives you such intentional passion that you don't have to try, that's when you know you're onto a good thing. Which is why for the last 3 years I've just been pushing on lots of doors, and most of them have opened for me, and I've never had that previously.
I don't know if you guys have experienced this yourselves personally, or had people talk about it, but it seems to me that often people can fall into the trap of being martyrs for other people, and always sort of shouldering the burden, let's say, and putting other people ahead of themselves, and that can almost turn into a bit of a vicious cycle, and then you find yourself doing, you're always the one working late on other people's behalf, or you're shouldering the pressure of the weight of the world, I suppose. So how do you kind of think people could sort of start to put a stop to that vicious circle and start building momentum the other way?
I think it's about sharing yourself. You're right. I think it isn't about shouldering that burden, and no one's leading this ultimately amazing life. I guess that's partly why I'm not on the kind of other social media platforms, but I applaud Nick for doing it, because he's going to change those reasons why people are on those platforms, and having someone like Nick on those platforms would certainly bring me back to them. But for me, it's about being really honest where you are. I try to be, and I like to think I'm as honest and transparent with my team about how I'm feeling, and I think everyone really is kind and wants to help, and it's only when you're honest and open with them that they're able to to be open and honest with you and help you as well. And it just creates this like lovely kind of virtuous circle between you where you support each other, because we all have highs and lows and bad and good days.
Sure, that sounds good.
I'd also add to that, and it I don't know whether it might lean in potentially to one of the other questions that's come through, that I said earlier, as individuals, we have more control than we think. And I think part of not feeling the weight and the pressure of other people is to be quite clear on your boundaries and the lines that you won't cross. You should never apologize for taking half an hour out to go for a walk, or to exercise, or to pick your children up early. And it's about, I think, individuals just feeling empowered to do that. And as I said earlier, leaders giving you permission. I now will only want to work in organizations with cultures that focus less on the output and more on the outcome. I think the days of you being chained to your desk for 12 hours a day should be behind us. The biggest organizations, the most successful product organizations, do not work in that way. There are so many organizations that do, unfortunately, but it takes people like Gavin in leadership positions to, over time, start changing that.
Sure. I think you were touching on a question we had from Farina. I don't know if you've got thoughts on this, Gavin, as to how you'd suggest employees approach their companies on allowing the time for self-care.
Yeah, I think something that always resonates with leadership and management teams is like data, and the very first step is to start the conversation and have it, and get it on the table. And then the next step is, hopefully your company has some kind of engagement or well-being survey where they're measuring the wellness of their workforce. And that can be that first indication that they need to take action and do something and allow that time for that self-care that you're talking about. And I think that can be the most powerful thing. And there's lots of research out there about the kind of value of investment on allowing self-care for employees, giving them that time to maintain their mental well-being. There's billions of pounds lost each year because of the suffering that happens in the workplace because they don't allow for that. And so there is actually a business case. So even if you're talking to that hard-nosed business person who wants to know what money they're going to get for this, it's there, it's documented, it's in all kinds of papers, and so you can even bring that to them as well. Like there's value to be had to them if that's all they care about is like the money side of it. But obviously, I would always ask people to kind of appeal to the human side of this first.
Sure. I guess often we talk about things like psychological safety within teams, and what if maybe you're in an environment where it's not particularly you don't feel particularly psychologically safe, and that if you're feeling this sort of sense of vulnerability, but your boss, let's say they're not open to hearing it, or the culture, HR, they're not so progressive about these sort of things. What would your advice be in those kind of circumstances?
That's interesting. I probably got a slightly more extreme view on it. My view on that is reaching out on forums like platforms like LinkedIn to try and find like-minded people to bounce things off, I think is quite helpful to just see how other organizations do it, because then that's potentially something you can bring in. I partnered, when I talked about the employee resource group, I partnered with our HR and wellbeing teams, and they should care about this kind of stuff. If neither of those things worked, in my personal view and based on my personal experience, I'd be reflecting on whether or not that culture and that organization was right for me as a human being, right? At some point you've got to say, when is enough, and only you as an individual know where that line is. And maybe my view's more extreme because I've gone to the edge, but yeah, speaking from personal experience, I would never let an organization put me back in that position.
Sure. Have you got anything to add to that, Gavin?
I think Nick's totally right, and I would just try building upon that, kind of like appealing to the business side of them first, and if that doesn't work, try and building up a coalition with your colleagues so it's not just a single voice. But ultimately, if nothing works there and they're not helping and supporting you, and you can't get what you need from outside of work as well. You need that from work. Then you kind of talk with your feet and walk out, and they won't keep good people if they don't care about this stuff. Like, the world's changing now,
Sure.
and the understanding from employers that they actually need to care about people and your well-being is dramatically changing, and you want to go where all the good people are going to be.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. So we've got a question from Paul. Agree and appreciate that everyone is different, but is there one thing, one change that could be universally helpful for people to try? So I guess if you had sort of one bit of advice for people out there, what would it be?
It would definitely be to start talking about it with someone. Like, that's the very first thing, is like almost recognizing it in yourself. Until you recognize that thing, and then by externalizing it, by talking about it, you're kind of really explicitly recognizing it then, and that almost gives you the agency and empowers you to actually start proactively dealing with it. Because until you recognize it and externalize it in a way, there's a risk, I guess, that you're not going to proactively deal with it. So you need to kind of take ownership, as Nick talked about of his story, and really driving forward and finding a way. And it's your mental health and managing it in that way. So number one, talk about it.
Sure, great. Any thoughts, Nick?
I think my view on that, my slight nuance, is I do agree with that, but I think, speaking from my own experience and just looking more broadly, the narrative around talking, I think, is really helpful, but I think it places a lot of emphasis on the person who's struggling. And I know when I was at my lowest that I didn't even understand it myself. So talking, I would have found almost impossible. I think now it's helped because we've got more technology now, which means you can do it, privately, and you can do it in an anonymous way. But my view on this is actually, all of us need to just be more confident and more comfortable to bring mental health into our everyday language and making sure in conversations. We're seeing it more with, in sport, for example. When you're down the pub with your mates watching the football, wouldn't it be amazing if you could genuinely have a conversation about how you're feeling, in a group, and asking and then listening to how people are feeling? For me, that's the big next step, is getting all of us much more comfortable with this topic, rather than just solely putting the onus on those that are struggling. Though I do agree that talking can definitely help, but it's just not always as easy as it's maybe made out to be.
And I guess to a certain extent as well, we can all ask other people. We can all ask our teams, how are they feeling? And so you can almost start by fostering a culture where you're allowing people to share with you how they're genuinely feeling, and then that can maybe snowball into, it comes back around to you, doesn't it? Because then people will care about you as well. The final thing I was going to ask you, it seems like that laughter is quite important for mental health, and aside from, if you don't feel confident enough to dress up as Batman or Spider-Man or what have you, you guys got any advice as to how we could maybe get more sort of fun in the workplace, particularly in these sort of times of remote working, when everyone's kind of at arm's length with each other and stuff, and you almost the pressure of the silence of not sort of having someone sat next to you. You've just got sort of the silence of Slack, haven't you, and stuff. So have you got any thoughts as to how maybe we can get more sort of lighter hearted sort of fun and attitudes into work?
I'll let Gav take that one first. I think you might be very well placed.
Oh, no. Nick. I mean, the kind of things we're trying today, I was talking to a colleague of mine about having a team day actually in the office soon, but making every activity we do around getting to know each other, around what we do as a team, what our future looks like, as a fun activity. And we're sharing it out between everyone in our product management team, so they take responsibility for each activity during the team day to make it. But the whole idea is to make each one as fun as possible, because we kind of realize what you're talking about, Rob, that it feels like this kind of remote work and almost like saps a little bit of the fun out of it, doesn't it? And so we're kind of trying to inject that back in. So when we do have those days in the office together in that time, that it's it's kind of like really powered up, and that's something that we're kind of trying at the moment, and talking about building regular social kind of events as a team into our calendar, just to be human.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good. How many more fancy dress costumes have you got, Nick?
No more. My wife will divorce me if I dress up. I've got about 30 or 40 in the loft, so I'm going to host a massive fancy dress party at some point. But beyond fancy dress, there's a lot of science, more and more emerging every day about the benefits to culture, to teams, to people, of having fun, of laughter in the office. I think what Gav said is absolutely true. As you embrace this hybrid way of working, I think when you get together in person, it's much easier. But I think probably getting creative with some of the virtual and remote stuff, because I felt like last year that the quiz, whilst it started out something everyone wanted to do, by the end of lockdown, pretty much everyone hated quizzes. But I've done things like online escape rooms, for example. So there's loads of things that actually do translate pretty well into the virtual world that some of your people might not have done before. So the key for me is moving beyond the quiz and trying to figure out something else that you can do that's maybe a little more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely felt the pinch of the quiz almost. Yeah, just the amount of quizzes or the questions you just run out of questions to ask people in the end. But yeah, I'm conscious of time. I know that Gavin's got another engagement, another meeting to head off to, so we'll call it quits here, and say thank you very much to both of you for your time and putting together these talks. I know it's not, it is time consuming to do these things, and so I'm really grateful that you took the time out to prepare the talks and to give the talks for us. Thanks everyone to watching. Obviously, you can find the talks. It's all recorded, so if you'd like to share the event with any colleagues or friends, then all the links are there. We'll also invite Nick and Gavin to join the Agile Roundabout Slack group. So if anyone's got any questions, even if it's in a day's time when you end up watching the video, then obviously feel free to ping a message over, or as the two guys said, they're both available on LinkedIn, and Nick's on other channels as well. So please get in touch if you've got any ideas or ideas you want to share or further questions. Obviously, the Agile Roundabout will be back again, I believe, next month. But seeing as this is I'm custodian tonight, I don't want to say the wrong thing. So we are definitely looking forward to getting back to an in-person event, which will be more fun again. So hopefully we'll see you all again in person sometime soon. So that's all for now. Thanks ever so much, guys, and enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Take care, guys.
Take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.